Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in. Actually, in the last video, I told you that I am playing a 5-minute introduction video because I want to manipulate the suppression of YouTube. When you mention any of the words that you shouldn't mention about this conflict at the beginning, it seems the first minute or two, YouTube is demonetizing and also suppressing the video, which means when the live streaming is over, around 1,000 people watch the video, and the next 24 hours, around 1,000 video watch the video, which is, it doesn't make any sense for me, especially with the number of the followers that I have on YouTube. Therefore, I did this the last time and it worked. So let's see how this one will work as well after 6 minutes and a half for this video. Today's video is divided into different parts, guys. At the beginning, I will start with the news that Israelis are saying that they have postponed the military operation in the Gaza Strip, and they are blaming the weather. And they say that due to the bad weather. So now this one, yeah. So they're saying that due to the bad weather, they have to postpone the military operation because the Air Force will not be able to operate as they are hoping for the Air Force to function. And to be honest with you, it doesn't make sense for me, especially with the technology that the Israeli side has and acquires. So the news says Israel stalls Gaza ground invasion over bad weather. An Israeli ground invasion of the Gaza Strip, which was set to take place over the weekend, which means the last weekend, has been delayed for a week over bad weather conditions, Israeli officials told New York Times on October 15th. According to the report, the current weather conditions could negatively affect the Air Force's ability to provide cover for troops invading the besieged strip. As I told you guys, the Israeli side, the American side, also the Russian side, these strong powers, they have the technology and the means to overcome this, especially after World War II, right? Because the weather back then played some role in the invading powers, for example, from the Nazi side against the Russian side. But this was mostly a problem for the ground forces and also for the aerial support for the ground forces. Right now, at this time, this has not playing a role. Like, look, a country like Syria that doesn't have all this sophisticated weaponry and technology, they were able during winter times to use their air force. So, in my opinion, this is just an excuse, and I will come back and tell you why this is an excuse and what's the real purpose behind postponing this operation. I have written a long analysis about this. I have made a video of it. It's 2.5 minutes. I will post it tonight on my Twitter account. So make sure, guys, also to follow me on Twitter. But I will also show you a glimpse of this video or the video itself for you before I publish it on Twitter, so you can get also an early access and exclusive access for that video. So Israel has been undergoing preparations for a ground invasion of the Gaza Strip as hundreds of thousands of reserve troops have been amassed. A newly formed Israeli war cabinet has green-lit the operation. However, Hebrew media has highlighted a dispute between the military and political branches of the Israeli government and on how deep an operation from within Gaza should go. The dispute revolves around whether Israel should focus on trying to weaken Hamas or pursue a full defeat of the resistance group and its extensive network of infrastructure inside the strip. Ehud Olmert, for example, the former prime minister of Israel, said, "Everything you can imagine and worse awaits Israeli troops inside Gaza," adding that an invasion of the strip is not, quote, simple. Concerns have been simmering that the ground assault could trigger a regional war, which would see several fronts open up against Israel. So, this last sentence is everything we need to know about this case, guys. The fear of a regional war is the main reason why the Israeli side has postponed its war. I will give you a glimpse of what happened the last week. There was a phone call for the first time between the leaders of Iran and Saudi Arabia. They have probably not spoken with each other, the leaders of these two countries, for probably 2 decades now. And they have they have spoken with each other on a phone call, and it seems that there is a consensus in Saudi Arabia, in Iran, in Syria, in Iraq, in Egypt, and in Jordan, these very important countries when it comes to this specific conflict, the Arab-Israeli conflict. There is a consensus that it's a red line for the Israeli forces to invade the Gaza Strip in order to ethnically cleanse and force the Palestinians to the Sinai region. This is the red line. So the Saudis, of course, they're not going to participate in any regional war. They are trying to normalize relations with the Israeli side, but they have sent warnings to the Israeli side. On the other side, the foreign minister of Iran, he flew to Beirut. He met with the Secretary General of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah. Then he traveled to Damascus. He met with President Bashar Assad, and then he went to Doha to meet with the leader of Hamas, I think Ismail Haniyeh, in Doha. At the same time, we have Antony Blinken. He visited Israel. He visited, I think, West Bank. I'm not sure if he met with Mahmoud Abbas. He went to Jordan, and I think his last trip was to Saudi Arabia. So all these trips and the understanding the different opinions and how these different powers see the conflict, it seems there is one consensus, although all the parties have different opinions and different policies, that the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip to Egypt is a red line. That's the consensus. So this is the real problem, in my opinion, why Israel didn't invade the Gaza Strip. Because if there is a regional war, which means Hezbollah intervenes, Syria intervenes, Iran intervenes, Israel will not be able to sustain multi-front war against its forces. Therefore, the United States has to intervene, and then that means also Iran has to intervene, and this is a big chaos in the region. And this will probably also give the perfect opportunity for Russia to finish its so-called special military offensive in Ukraine. So things aren't working in favor of the United States if there is regional war in the region. And I will come back to that and tell you exactly how do I know that. But before that, I will show you now the video that I created today, guys. And I will post it on Syriana Analysis in a few hours. Sorry, on my Twitter account, because on Syriana Analysis YouTube channel, I'm creating longer videos, and on my Twitter account, or X, I'm posting short videos. This is the video that I made today, and I explained in length my opinion about this case. Take a look. So, guys, okay, so you say the sound is out. That's very strange because I was. No, I'm not going to play the video again. This is a raw video, by the way, that I showed you. I don't know why the music, I was able to hear it. I will post this video with video edited, and also background music of it. It's a really nice version that I created, and I will post it on my Twitter account in an hour or two after I finish this live streaming. So please follow me on Twitter. I don't know why the music, the voice was not apparent or played, although I was hearing it quite clearly. It seems that this is a software issue. In anyways, my analysis was that the Israeli side knows that the intervention now into the Gaza Strip will definitely develop into the intervention, the direct intervention of Hezbollah into this conflict. And Hezbollah is no more a militia. It has over 100,000 soldiers, and they have gained lots of combat experience in Syria when they fought against ISIS, al-Nusra. Those are vicious groups and very well trained and strong groups, actually. And now Hezbollah has anti-tank rockets. They have air defense systems, and also they probably have anti-ship cruise missiles. So those are very dangerous weapons for Israel. And also Hezbollah is capable of neutralizing all the air bases of the Israeli forces and also the ports, which explains the presence of the American airplane carriers in the Mediterranean. They have two now. So this was, in short, the video, guys. I think now the fate of the Middle East or West Asia is in the hands of Israel. Israel is the only one who can decide now how could this conflict develop in the region and where could it lead. Because if it invades Gaza, as I mentioned, this is what is expecting for Israeli side in the region, and that's why they delayed it. If they don't intervene directly or wage the ground offensive against Gaza, this will also mean that the Hamas side and the Palestinian side will consider it as a surrender, and they will consider it a victory for themselves. So, in my opinion, both options for Israel are bad, but of course the worst is the regional war. And this is also an analysis that is shared. I'm very happy that Professor John Marsheimer, he shares my opinion, and he's the author also of a very brilliant book. By the way, guys, if you want to read that book, you should definitely do it, called Israel Lobby and U.S. Foreign Policy. I have read it in 2010, and I'm still, some of my understandings of the Israeli policy and the U.S. foreign policy as well is actually derived from this book. So I would definitely encourage you to read that book, Israel Lobby and U.S. Foreign Policy. So check what does he say in this regard.
I think this is very hard to predict because a lot depends on whether the Israelis go into Gaza with ground forces. There's been a lot of talk about them going into Gaza and tearing the place apart, finding Hamas and eradicating Hamas. But I think the Israelis, this is just a guess, but I think the Israelis have come to realize that this is not a smart idea, that going into Gaza and trying to eliminate Hamas will cause more trouble than it's worth. And then at the end, even if you were to eradicate Hamas, you'll just get a new radicalized group in its place. You're not going to solve the problem with military force. This is a political problem. So one question is, do they go in or do they not go in? But they're in a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, because if they don't go in, Hamas lives to fight another day for sure. And they're well armed and they're going to continue to cause problems. Then if they don't go in, they bomb Gaza. But this is a total disaster, not only because from a human point of view, from a human rights point of view, just seeing civilians killed is an absolutely horrible thing, but also it does no good strategically. It doesn't solve the problem. It just enrages people inside the Palestinian world, inside the Arab world, and it even loses support over time for Israel in the West. So bombing is no solution either. So the Israelis are really between a rock and a hard place. I don't know what they do to fix the problem. And this gets back to my earlier point that the solution to this was a two-state solution.
Right. I have to ask you this because you're so well regarded internationally. What would you do if Bibi Netanyahu called you up and says, Professor Mearsheimer, give me your guidance?
Well, I've thought about that question. I would tell him to back off from the bombing as soon as possible and not go further down that road. And I would advise not to go into Gaza. And I would tell him that what he ought to do and what his colleagues ought to do is reverse gear and or reverse direction and move towards a two-state solution. But he's never going to accept that. And he heads up a governing coalition that includes a number of people who are much further to the right than he is.
Right.
And if you look at the demographics in Israel over time, right, this is a country that's going to get more and more hawkish and more anti-Palestinian over time. That, coupled with the present events, makes it almost impossible to see how you get a two-state solution. So I think I could give him that advice, and even if he were willing to listen to me, which he wouldn't be, he couldn't execute it because the politics inside Israel no longer facilitate a two-state solution. That train has left the station.
Professor John Mearsheimer, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Guys, this is so correct. Unfortunately, the two-state solution is it has become very difficult to achieve under these circumstances for two reasons. One, because the Gaza Strip, for example, is disconnected from the West Bank. I don't know if you know the map of control over Palestine nowadays. Israelis occupy most of the Palestine. They left a little bit of the West Bank and they built lots of settlements over it. And then you have a separate region, Gaza Strip. There is no highway connecting between them, or there is no geography connecting between them. Plus, the Israeli side is building, as I mentioned, illegal settlements in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem, which is part of the Palestinian state. And also they are sieging the Gaza Strip. It seems that the Israeli side, and especially under Netanyahu, they don't believe in a two-state solution. And at the same time, even if they want to promote or push for a one-state solution under, let's call it, an Israeli state, they also don't like the fact that the demographics is in favor of the Arabs, whether they're Christians or Muslims, because the Arab people are multiplying very fast and they're having more kids in contrast to the Jewish people in let's say the Israeli controlled areas. And the demographics will in a decade or two or three, they will always be in favor of the Arabic side. So in both cases, is as Professor John Mearsheimer said, Israel is between rock and a hard place. And this also applies to the situation in the Gaza Strip. If they go to the Gaza Strip, it's regional war. If they don't go to the Gaza Strip and listen to Professor John Mearsheimer, that means that the Palestinians will consider that as a surrender and a defeat for the Israeli side. I will just thank, I don't know the real name, Black Tie, and also Sean, for your generous support, guys. Thank you so much. I will also thank a person, I don't know if I have to mention his name or her name. I received a donation today from through PayPal. I will say I received a donation from on PayPal 200 euros, and I already invested this money in buying a lens, a camera lens, guys. I already have a camera that I can use it as a webcam. At the moment, I'm using my mobile as a webcam. So I have a good video camera that I can use for higher quality video streaming. And I needed the lens for it, and lenses are not really cheap. So I needed more, let's say, to invest in it. And since I received today this donation, I already invested it. So soon, very soon, as I was saying in Arabic, inshallah, I will use the professional video camera and also this lens so that I can make a better live streaming for you guys. And there is another leaked memo. So it's not only that there is a fear of war in regional war in the region, but also there is a memo that was leaked yesterday. and it is published by the Iran Observer. This is a letter, guys, from General Daniel Håkansson. He is the Chief National Guard Bureau, from the Chief National Guard Bureau. Let's summarize first what's the main headlines of this memo. American troops do not want to die for Israel. So the American troops are saying they don't want to die for Israel, which is, in my opinion, is a correct thing to do. And two, CENTCOM, which is the Center for the Military American Military Presence in the region, was caught off guard and doesn't have. So the CENTCOM was caught off guard and doesn't have enough assets to support Israel in case of intervention or conflagration of a regional war. So American troops don't want to die for Israel. And the second, the American forces in the region, they were surprised by this attack, and they don't have enough military means to support their Israeli allies if there is a regional war, because regional war means they have to have a military plan, equipment, supply lines, and everything in order to fight on multiple fronts in Syria, in Iraq, in Iran, in Lebanon, and in Israel. They don't have that means at the moment. The third, CENTCOM doesn't believe Israel will be able to handle a multi-front war. This is exactly what I told you guys. The Americans are here correct, and they are correct in their judgment that the Israelis do not have the means to fight on two fronts or multiple fronts. So this is the letter. He said the General Daniel Håkansson, he is sending to someone, which is of course it's blurred, or in black it's erased. I want to set up a meeting to discuss something concerning I'm hearing from Tony. Apparently there is growing anti-Semitism among the enlisted troops who are openly stating they are against Israel and not willing to put their lives on the line for them. With Trump remarks against Netanyahu on Wednesday, this problem is only going to get worse. We need to come up with a strategy to deal with this and rally the troops in support of Israel against Hamas. I think it best we try to get ahead of this, as Tony believes it is becoming an issue. When I spoke to Ori shortly after the attack, he expressed concerns about the Republicans in Congress and if they would hinder full support from the US. I tried to assuage his concerns, but he is not wrong. CENTCOM told me Tuberville's hold is having major impact on their operation. CENTCOM has limited forces and was not expecting a hot war to break out in the region. This, combined with the lack of confirmed leadership positions, means CENTCOM will not be able to support Israel should this turn into a multi-front war. If Hezbollah enters the fray, to be honest, if Hezbollah or other players enter the war, Israel won't be able to defend themselves either. Let's pray that doesn't happen. Let me know if you have any suggestions and try to get the key players together for a meeting on Monday. I think this document is damning and revealing a lot of what could expect Israel if there is an intervention of this sort in the Gaza Strip, an invasion, a ground invasion, and which could lead, as I told you, to the intervention of Hezbollah. Today I was watching videos from southern Lebanon, and what Hezbollah is doing at the moment, they are shooting with snipers and rifles and some rocket attacks, mortar attacks actually, against the spying cameras. There is so many sensors and so many equipments that the Israelis have installed on the borders with southern Lebanon, so that they can spy and watch and record everything that is happening there, so they can detect if there is any attempt by the Hezbollah side to come and invade the settlements in northern Israel, right? This is what Hezbollah is shooting right now. They're just destroying them, which gives the impression, in my opinion, that Hezbollah is also preparing for war. And my information from Syria, and this is a credible source, say that Hezbollah has withdrawn some of its forces from Syria because, as you may know, Hezbollah has a military presence in Syria, and they have fought shoulder to shoulder with the Syrian army against the terrorist groups such as ISIS, Al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda, and all these groups. And they still have posts and sites in Syria. So they have withdrawn some of their forces, and especially also from Aleppo, from northern Syria, to Lebanon. Again, there is a mobilization of forces. The Hezbollah has digged in tens of bunkers and tunnels underground. Guys, Hezbollah has built a city under the city. In southern Lebanon, if the Israelis want to intervene, like to wage a ground offensive, which they will ever do again after the 2006 experience, they will be fighting ghosts because Hezbollah is already under the ground, and they have established, as I told you, city under a city, and they just can open the ground, come and shoot and go down, and also fly their missiles and rockets. And they have precision missiles and rockets, and they have anti-aircraft missiles, they have anti-tank missiles, they have most likely anti-ship cruise missiles as well. So they are very strong in this regard. This is not a wishful thinking, guys. This is my observation, and this is my analysis of what I see. And now we have the American side is also saying, like, for our troops don't want to die for the Israelis. Why? I mean, in my opinion, why would an American come and die for Israel, right? Like, what's the purpose for it? Before I tell you the answer for that, I would just like to thank EM for this general support as well. Thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate this support, and it really enables me to become an independent journalist and do lots of research. Believe me, every live streaming, it takes lots of hours of my time to do research and prepare for live streaming on a daily basis like this. So thank you so much. The reason for that is mentioned by RFK. RFK, who claims to be anti-war and anti-intervention in everywhere, except with Israel. It seems like he's just talking sanity in every case, but when it comes to Israel, you feel like he's a neocon hawk. You know, he's the only candidate who is running for peace, but then he's calling for. He says that we don't have a choice. Israel is not a choice. Like, we should intervene, right? And he says we need Israel because they are like an aircraft carrier in the Middle East, and China is there. So according to him, Israel is an aircraft carrier for the United States, and if they withdraw, the Chinese will come and fill the vacuum. Check what he says.
My position, first of all, I'm not, I would describe myself, I'm anti-war. Everybody's anti-war. But there's wars that are not wars of choice. And those kind of wars are like World War II. We were attacked at Pearl Harbor, and we need to respond. The Ukraine war is a war of choice. We shouldn't be in it. And we look for wars of choice. What's happening in Israel is not a war of choice. Oh, I support Israel, and I'll tell you why. Israel is our oldest partner for 75 years. It's been our lead partner. It is critical to American national security in the Mideast. It's the only democracy in the Mideast, and it has served a purpose for it. It's like almost like an aircraft carrier in the Mideast for us. The alliance is so close. Is completely surrounded by nations that are not only hostile to Israel, but a lot of them are hostile to the United States. The biggest oil producers in the world, Iran, which is in league with China. And in league, Iran now controls Venezuela. Hezbollah is in Venezuela. The Iranian fleet is in Venezuela. If Israel disappears, which is the ambition of Iran, the ambition of Hamas, we would lose our beachhead in the Mideast. And who would fill that? China. And China would control all the oil, 90% of the oil of the world.
So, according to RFK, I'm not going to play the entire thing. It's 10 minutes. You can watch it on Kim Iverson's Twitter account, the entire thing. According to him, Israel is very important because Israel represents an aircraft carrier for the United States. And secondly, if Israel disappears, according to him, I'm just paraphrasing or quoting him, then the United States will no more have a presence in the region, again, according to him, and then the Chinese will come and fill the vacuum. So this is why Americans have to support the United States or die. The Americans have to support Israel and die for Israel, which is not one of the federal states of the United States. It's just crazy that the Americans have gone to war in Iraq for Israel. if you read the book of Professor John Mearsheimer, you will see that how the Israeli lobby played the instrumental role in sending the United States to war in Iraq. And then Israel was the one who pushed the United States to go into this regime change war in Syria. The Americans have lost trillions of dollars in these wars. They have lost soldiers, and for the sake of Israel, right? And this is all, guys, documentable. I'm not just like bluffing and saying stuff, right? You can go and read the book Israel Lobby and U.S. Foreign Policy. It's a brilliant book. It's full of documents, full of citations that you can relate to also what is happening nowadays and why the Americans are rushing to protect their ally Israel in the region. But Biden is a little bit cautious, by the way, which surprised me in this regard. I will show you. This is from the New York Times, guys. Biden warned Israel not to occupy Gaza, which is very strange. While the president has stood strongly behind Israel since Hamas attacked, he said on 60 Minutes that a new occupation of Gaza would be a big mistake. President Biden warned Israel in an interview aired on Sunday not to reoccupy Gaza in his first significant public effort to restrain America's ally. Mr. Biden has suffered staunch support for Israel since the October 7 attack and refused to criticize Israel for its retaliatory siege of Gaza, the coastal enclave controlled by Hamas, even as UN officials have warned a humanitarian crisis there. But in the new interview, he cautioned against a full-scale occupation of Gaza. He said, quote, "I think it would be a big mistake," Mr. Biden told 60 Minutes on CBS. "Look, what happened in Gaza, in my view, is Hamas, and the extreme elements of Hamas do not represent all the Palestinian people. And I think that it would be a mistake for Israel to occupy Gaza again. But taking out the extremists there," he added, "is a necessary requirement." The president's comments came as he was considering whether to visit Israel in the coming days to demonstrate solidarity with Israelis still reeling from the Hamas attack. Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2006 and Hamas won elections the next year. The group seized complete control of the enclave and pushed out more moderate Palestinian leaders like those running the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. Many military analysts have said that a ground offensive into Gaza and the resulting urban warfare could be extremely dangerous for Israeli forces and Palestinian civilians alike. Israel has mobilized 360,000 reservists and assembled considerable forces near Gaza in preparation for what is widely expected to be an invasion. 360,000 reservists is like 6 soldiers for, like 1 soldier for every 6 Palestinians. We're not talking about Hamas. Hamas has few hundred probably soldiers there. We're speaking about 360,000 reservists were called for 2 million people, which means for every 6 Palestinians, there is 1 Israeli soldier. Right, yeah, if my calculations are correct. Even before any ground offensive, Israeli airstrike and its decision to cut off food, water, and other supplies have created what international aid organizations have called a humanitarian crisis. Like, they don't even dare to say, like, it is a humanitarian catastrophe, right? They said, like, what the international aid organizations have called is an humanitarian crisis. I mean, how can like, what else should the Israeli side do for it to be considered a humanitarian crisis? At least 2,670 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed. They don't mention that over 700 of them are kids under 18 years old, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza, and an additional 9,600 have been wounded. So I don't think this statement from Biden is coming from a blank. He is definitely receiving the signals from the Middle East, and also he's getting the information from his Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, after his visit to West Asia or the Middle East, that there is a consensus in the region that it is a red line for the Israelis to invade the Gaza Strip, and this could lead into a regional war. The Americans aren't ready for a regional war. They don't have enough supply lines. They don't have enough troops in the region. And also the Israelis cannot sustain and multiple fronts against them. This is a reasonable, in my opinion, approach from the Biden side. Of course, he says that they have to eliminate the radicals from the Gaza Strip. But please, guys, show me how the Israelis are eliminating the radical elements. guys, I can't even, like the last time I played a video of a drone video of the Gaza Strip, and YouTube considered it a violation of their community standards. There was no graphic video or picture or anything. It was just a drone footage of the destruction in the Gaza. It's like Dresden. It's like Dresden. It's like there is a atomic bomb fell over the Gaza Strip. It's completely carpet bombed, guys. Please, if you want to watch these videos, just go on Twitter, drone, just type drone and Gaza and watch these videos. I can't even show you on YouTube. It's like the suppression has become the censorship. Like when I turn on my TV now and I want to watch something on YouTube, I'm receiving advertisements, paid advertisements from the Israeli government telling me that I have to be sympathetic with Israel. This is coming from the Israeli government. This is where we are living at the moment. So, because of this, when they said the radical elements in the Gaza Strip, I wanted to also bring your attention to what an Israeli person actually said the other day. She's a survivor of the Hamas attack on her settlement. So this woman survived the attack and she was captured by Hamas, right? And she's alive and she has given an interview to a radio and she was speaking with them. So what she says, Israeli forces shot their own civilians, kibbutz survivor says. An Israeli woman who survived the Hamas assault on settlements near the Gaza boundary on 7 October says Israeli civilians were undoubtedly killed by their own security forces. It happened when Israeli forces engaged in fierce gun battles with Palestinian fighters in kibbutz Be'eri and fired indiscriminately at both the fighters and their Israeli prisoners. She said, quote, they eliminated everyone, including the hostages, she told Israeli radio. There was very, very heavy crossfire and even tank shelling, she says. The woman, who is 45 years old, mother of three, Yasmin Porat, her name is Yasmin Porat, said that prior to that, she and other civilians had been held by the Palestinians for several hours and treated, quote, humanely. She had fled the nearby quote Nova rave. So as you know, there was a rave nearby the Gaza Strip, and this rave was invaded by Hamas, and it's claimed that they have killed many ravers, and she was one of the ravers there. A recording of her interview from radio program Haboker Hadze, which means this morning, hosted by Aryeh Golan on state broadcaster Khan, has been circulating on social media, and this is the literal interview with English subtitles, guys, for you if you want to see and be sure that what I'm saying is accurate. Take a look.
ובמשך שעה דופקים 10 מחבלים בהיכל הממ"ד, צעקות בערבית. זה היה שעה מאוד מאוד מתוחה והרגשנו בפחד שלא יתואר. ואחרי שעה הם מצליחים לפרוץ את הממ"ד ומוצאים אותנו, את ארבעתנו, לבית ליד, שכבר בו שהו 8 בני ערובה נוספים. אנחנו מצטרפים ל8 האלה, ואנחנו הולכים להיות דרך כ12 בני ערובה, עם 40 מחבלים, ששומרים עלינו. אני מקצרת לך את הסיפור,
הם מתעללים בכם?
הם לא מתעללים בנו, הם מתנהגים אלינו בצורה מאוד אנושית, זה אומר שהם שומרים עלינו. כן, מה זה אומר אנושית? שומרים עלינו, הם נותנים לנו לשתות פה ושם, שהם רואים שאנחנו בלחץ, הם מרגיעים אותנו. הייתה תחושה מאוד מאוד מפחידה, אבל אף אחד לא התנהג אלינו באלימות. למזלי, לא קרה לי מה שאני שומעת בתקשורת.
קרו דברים איומים ונוראים.
נכון, אבל אחרי שעתיים, בקיצור, בהתחלה לא היה שום גורם ביטחוני איתנו. אנחנו אלה שהתקשרנו במשטרה יחד עם החוטפים, כי החוטפים רצו שהמשטרה תגיע, כי המטרה שלהם הייתה לחטוף אותנו לעזה. בסיומה, במהלכה, אחד המחבלים החליט להיכנע, זה מחבל שיצר איתי קשר, במהלך השעתיים האלה יצרתי קשר עם כמה מהחוטפים, אלה ששמרו על הבני ערובה.
כן.
והוא מחליט להשתמש בי כמגן אנושי, הוא מחליט להיכנע, אני לא מודעת לזה באותם רגעים, זה בדיעבד, הוא מתחיל להתפשט, הוא קורא לי ומתחיל לצאת איתי מהבית תחת אש, אני צועקת בזמן הזה לימ"מ כשהם יכולים לשמוע אותי שיפסיקו לראות,
כן.
ואז הם שומעים אותי ומפסיקים לראות. אני רואה על הדשא של בגינה של האנשים מהקיבוץ, שיש 5 בני ערובה ששוכבים, או 6, על האדמה בחוץ, ממש כצאן לטבח, מול הירי של הימ"מ שלנו והמחבלים.
הטרוריסטים ירו בהם?
לא, הם נהרגו מהחילופי ירי, תבין שהיה חילופי ירי מאוד מאוד קשים.
זאת אומרת, יכול להיות שזה כוחותינו ירו בהם?
חד
כשניסו
משמעית.
לחסל את החוטפים, את
כן, הם חיסלו את
החמאס.
כולם, כולל הבני ערובה, כי היה שם חילופי ירי מאוד מאוד קשים. אני משוחררת בסביבות השעה 5:30, ב8:30 כנראה מסתיימת הלחימה, אחרי שהיה חילופי אש מטורפים, אפילו 2 פקזים של טנק שירו לתוך הבית, שזה בית קיבוצי קטן, זה לא איזה, רואים את זה בחדשות.
כן.
זה לא מקום גדול. וברגע הזה כולם נהרגו, היה שקט חוץ מניצולה אחת שיצאה הדס דגן, וזהו, וגם.
איך כולם נהרגו?
מהחילופי אש.
מהחילופי אש, כלומר, יכול להיות שגם זה מאש כוחותינו?
חד משמעית.
כן?
וככה אני מאמינה.
אוי, זה נשמע כל...
So this is it, guys. As you can see, as you also heard, there is. I told you from day one. I do not. I do not rule out the possibility that Hamas kills civilians at all. At the same time, I do not rule out the possibility that some of the civilians who died on the Israeli side, they died in a crossfire. And I have seen a video from this rave where the Israeli side, where the Hamas was jumping over the rave with their whatever they were flying with. And there was Israeli police and Israeli army nearby, and they were running with the ravers and shooting on the Hamas, and they were receiving bullets from the Hamas side as well. So, of course, some of these civilians died during these crossfires. That's 100% sure. But because some of the information coming from Israel is condemning the Israeli narrative in this regard, now we have the Likud minister, I think he's a communication minister, yeah. The communication minister is formulating emergency regulations to imprison Israeli citizens who, quote, harm national morale. So this woman, for example, if she goes again to radio, if this law is adopted, she would be imprisoned because she's harming the national morale. Communications Minister Shlomo Karhi is promoting regulations that would allow him to direct police to arrest civilians, remove them from their homes, or seize their property if he believes they have spread information that could harm national morale or served as the basis for enemy propaganda. It will apply to both the general public and the media, as well as both local and foreign media, in contrast to the stated objective to limit Al Jazeera. It will also apply to the publication of factually correct statements at the minister's direct discretion. The draft defines, quote, aiding the enemy through communication as the dissemination of information that undermines the morale of Israel's soldiers and residents in the face of the enemy, or information that serves as a basis for enemy propaganda, including the spreading of the enemy's propaganda messages or information that aids the enemy in its war against Israel, its residents, or Jews. This is a so broad definition, you know, anything that you could say. If you're a journalist or a citizen journalist or an activist, that they consider it like aiding the enemy or breaking the morale of the soldiers or harming simply the Jews, in the opinion of this minister, you could be imprisoned. So here they say like everything is covered from broadcast equipment, from pictures, from videos, and everything that you could use, or if you say anything in the radio, you could be imprisoned. So this is what the Israeli side is trying to do right now, to block the flow of the information to the outside world. But there is someone who is unhappy by the current state of affairs in the region, and that is Zelensky. We haven't spoken about it for a long time after the war in Palestine, and he's unhappy about that. And he says he is warning, of course, of consequences of Israel war diverting attention from Ukraine. He says Ukrainian President Zelensky warned, if international attention turns away from Ukraine, it will have consequences, he says. Zelensky told the French television network Russia is in desperate need for a pause in order to recognize and move more equipment, soldiers. Let me just do this like this. It's better for you also to read. Yeah. So soldiers and weapons to the front line in Ukraine. He said he feared the shift in focus among world powers from the conflict in Eastern Europe to the new conflict in the Middle East risks giving the Russian military the break they needed. I mean, this is exactly what's happening. And I don't know why he is so surprised and he's so as if he was unaware that his country has been used as a pawn against Russia. And after the failed counteroffensive, everybody understood in the Pentagon, in the CIA, that Ukrainians cannot win this war. I mean, this was obvious for any rational actor and any rational observer, but the Americans were putting all their eggs in the basket of this counteroffensive, and they thought that the Ukrainians may break through some of the defensive lines, right? But when they failed, now they flipped the strategy from counteroffensive, Ukraine will win this war, into war of attrition. A long war, probably a decade or two. Nobody wins this war. We just send very few weaponry and some money to the Ukrainians so they can sustain. Unlike in the past when they were saying we're sending these weapons for them to win this war, right? And this is again an analysis, one more time, is shared by Professor John Mearsheimer, which it seems that because of watching the last video now, the algorithm of Twitter is showing more videos of him. He says Ukraine is finished, basically. Take a look.
Is Ukraine finished?
Yeah, I think that Admiral Kirby's comments that we are not going to continue funding Ukraine for the long term basically means that they're finished. I mean, as everybody understands, if we pull the plug on the Ukrainians, they're doomed. They don't have the weaponry, they don't have the financial resources to continue this fight, and the Russians will roll over them. President Biden and others have made the argument that we're behind the Ukrainians until the end. We're not going to bail on them. Well, we're bailing on them now. And it's hard for me to see, especially in light of the failed counteroffensive, how the Ukrainians don't collapse.
Is Ukraine?
So you remember, guys, the statements, we will support Ukraine as long as it takes. It seems that this was just for media consumption. And the Americans are going to abandon Ukraine in this regard. And this was confirmed, as Professor Mearsheimer said, by John Kirby. He's the White House spokesperson. And he said, the funding for Ukraine is coming near to the end of the rope and is not going to be indefinite. Take a look.
Thanks. Just to follow up on Brian's question, I know contours of the congressional package is still taking shape, but can you provide us anything on a timeline or give us a sense of how quickly the U.S. would exhaust what it can provide to Israel before congressional action is needed?
We have existing authorities and appropriations to support Israel in the near term. And I got asked last time, what is near term or what's a bit mean? I can't give you a date certain on the calendar because a lot of it's going to depend on their expenditure rate and what the replenishment ability is, or what the need is, and what our ability to do it is. But in the near term, we've got appropriations and authorities for both Ukraine and for Israel. But you don't want to be trying to bake in long-term support when you're at the end of the rope. And in Ukraine, on the Ukraine funding, we're coming near to the end of the rope. I mean, today we announced $200 million. And we'll keep that aid going as long as we can, but it's not going to be indefinite. So are we moving with a sense of alacrity? Absolutely. I couldn't give you a date certain on the calendar.
So apparently the as long as it takes, as one of the commentators said, is as long as it takes to finish on the last young Ukrainian, standing Ukrainian. They almost killed, like they literally killed tens of thousands of Ukrainian men in fighting age. The rest escaped the country. They became refugees in Eastern Europe and in Germany. There are so many refugees here in Germany as well. And this also proves the Henry Kissinger's famous quote: to be an enemy of the United States is dangerous. Of course, they will try to overthrow you. They will try to destabilize your country. But to be a friend is fatal. And this has been proven over and over again. Because in my opinion, the establishment in the United States, we're not talking about like a government that changes with elections. There is a deep state in the United States. There is a huge structure, hierarchy of powers in the United States, whether it's the banking system, whether it's the military industrial complex, whether it's the influential billionaires there. And they have created a system that is recycling different faces, but with similar thoughts, with similar policy approach, because the donors for these politicians to become to power is the same, right? So, and these people are benefiting from the wars. The American economy is built on war. They enrich when they go to war. But there are also some wars are too costly and too risky, and it causes shifts in the balance of power, one of which is now in Ukraine. And this was, in my opinion, a failed American war in Ukraine. Of course, they destabilized Eastern Ukraine and Eastern Europe, and they crushed the economy in Germany. Some of it was success, but when the declared goal, which was to destroy Russia, weaken it, didn't work out. Russia has overcome these obstacles, and they have emerged more powerful from this war in terms of the military power and in terms of the economic power, and also alliances with different countries around the world, especially with China and in the global south, or the countries in West Asia, countries in Africa, etc. Right? I will end up this live stream, guys. I had so many other things to say. Like I just looked, it's already 57 minutes. Wow. There is a Spanish minister, which I was really surprised because she's from a left-wing party, and a Spanish minister says Netanyahu should be brought for ICC for war crimes. Spain's Minister of Social Rights, she's from the Podemos party. If you're Spanish, guys, please let me know in the comments below what kind of party is it. I'm not sure about it. Spain's Minister of Social Rights released a statement Monday calling on her country's coalition government to petition the International Criminal Court to open a war crimes investigation into Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, citing the ongoing aerial bombardment of the Gaza Strip and the devastating blockade that has prevented the free flow of desperately needed humanitarian aid. Israel is not a member state of the ICC, but the top prosecutor for the Netherlands-based court told Reuters last week that war crimes carried out by Hamas and the Israeli government fall under the body's jurisdiction. I will play the video that she posted on her Twitter account with English subtitles for you to watch, guys.
Buenos días, bon día, egunon, vos días. Me dirijo a todas vosotras y vosotros con el corazón absolutamente encogido por las imágenes que nos llegan desde Palestina. Desde Podemos no somos indiferentes al atroz sufrimiento que el pueblo palestino lleva viviendo durante décadas. Hoy queremos alzar nuestra voz para denunciar que el Estado de Israel está llevando a cabo un genocidio planificado en la Franja de Gaza, dejando sin luz, sin comida y sin agua a cientos de miles de personas y llevando a cabo bombardeos sobre población civil que son un castigo colectivo, incumplen gravemente el derecho internacional y pueden considerarse crímenes de guerra. Ante esto, Estados Unidos y la Unión Europea no es solo que miren hacia otro lado, es que están jaleando al Estado de Israel en su política de apartheid y de ocupación que vulnera gravemente los derechos humanos. Usar los terribles asesinatos de civiles israelíes por parte de las facciones armadas palestinas como excusa para justificar los crímenes de Israel en general y la masacre en Gaza en particular es algo absolutamente inaceptable. El Estado de Israel, su primer ministro y su partido han reconocido en numerosas ocasiones que promocionaron a Hamás para debilitar a los sectores laicos de la resistencia palestina. Usar a Hamás como una excusa para asesinar millares de civiles palestinos, incluidos niños y niñas, es de una hipocresía incalificable. tanto por parte de Israel como de los países que le justifican. Por todo ello, en nombre de Podemos, quiero plantear 4 exigencias muy concretas y muy urgentes. En primer lugar, y de forma prioritaria, se tienen que establecer corredores humanitarios que permitan la salida de civiles y la entrada de la ayuda humanitaria y de los equipos de emergencia. Necesitamos medios y recursos para la protección de la población civil, sin excepción y sin demora. En segundo lugar, solicitamos a nuestro socio, el Partido Socialista, que trabajemos juntos para presentar desde el Gobierno de España una petición ante la Fiscalía de la Corte Penal Internacional para que se investiguen los crímenes de guerra cometidos en Palestina por Netanyahu, como se hizo recientemente en el caso de la cooperante española asesinada en la guerra de Ucrania, así como los perpetrados por Hamás en Israel y los territorios ocupados contra población civil. En tercer lugar, la Unión Europea debe dejar de ser cómplice de un criminal de guerra como Netanyahu, actuar con autonomía y cambiar sus discursos y sus acciones. Para ello, es urgente reconocer públicamente que lo que estamos viendo en Gaza son crímenes de guerra y que las vidas de las palestinas y los palestinos importan. Israel tiene que sentir la presión internacional para que ponga fin a los bombardeos, mediante todas las medidas que estén a nuestro alcance, como el embargo de armas o las sanciones a los responsables de los ataques. Y en último lugar, la Unión Europea debe desplegar todos sus esfuerzos diplomáticos para terminar con la ocupación y el apartheid por parte de Israel sobre Palestina, que es la causa profunda del conflicto que se expresa en el día de hoy. La Unión Europea puede y debe buscar la complicidad de países que tengan capacidad de interlocución con todos los actores del conflicto, especialmente aquellos países del sur global, para promover una salida negociada que asegure una paz justa, duradera y estable en la región. Solo así vamos a poder proteger todas las vidas a ambos lados.
I think this is a very good speech and statement by her. I don't know her. She's from the Podemos Spanish party. If you know what's the party about, please let me know in the comments below. One of the commentators said that she's from a left party and they support Hamas because they support, Vincent. He said, I can explain that. The French left says the same. They are just supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. They have been for years. I don't know about it, my friend, to be honest with you. She also called Hamas a radical group. But what I can say for sure to you guys is that Israel enabled Hamas. They wanted for Hamas to be established in the 80s. In late 80s, in order for Israel, it's very important to paint its enemies as radicals. And before Hamas, of course, they tried to paint, for example, the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, as radical. But most of the Palestinian armed groups against Israel were secular groups or left-wing groups or communist groups, and it was easier for the Palestinian groups to gain sympathy around the world, and it was more difficult to paint them as terrorists. And Israelis' idea was to allow Hamas to grow and take over Gaza Strip, so that they could paint the Palestinians, like any resistance that comes from the Palestinian side, they can paint it as a terrorist, they can paint it as an Islamist, and it's easier to discredit the Palestinian, let's say, any group that is struggling for ending the occupation, for example. So this is the idea that you create a situation like the Brits in the 20s of the 20th century. They have also enabled the Muslim Brotherhood. They have created, they facilitated the creation of the Muslim Brotherhood, because back then the nationalists and socialists were organizing resistance against the British mandate or the British occupation. So they have created an Islamist factions in Egypt, so that the socialists and the left-wingers and the nationalists as well, they could have an opponent, the Islamists, and they are now busy with an infighting. They did the same in Syria. They helped the Islamists there as well to gain momentum. This is, in my opinion, a recycled strategy. So they also did the same to Palestine. Also, Islamists are usually a regressive force most of the time. So they could also keep the societies backward. This is my opinion, and I think there is so many evidence that supports this, that the Americans and the Israelis supported these regressive radical Islamist groups in the Arab world and abroad. So I already passed the 1 hour for today. There were some other topics I wanted to mention, but unfortunately, the time is off, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. I really appreciate that you guys are watching first the video and also sharing it with your friends and colleagues on social media platforms. I also would like to send special thanks to every patron that became my patron only last week. There are many of you guys. I have around, I believe, 110 patrons. Patreon is a very easy way for you to support me. The link is, as you can see, guys, here is on the screen. You can buy me 1 coffee per month. It costs you only $2. And I invest these $2 in my independent journalism, in the equipment, in the software, so that I can continue bringing you a content like this. So thank you very much for your generous support, and I will see you hopefully tomorrow. Ciao.